Your bank account is lying to you. The number you see when you check your balance, it represents less purchasing power today than it did yesterday.
And tomorrow it will represent even less. But here is what is really happening.
This isn't just market forces. This isn't even economics as most people understand it. This is the most calculated wealth extraction system ever designed, operating in full view while remaining completely invisible to 99% of the population. The United States government has a $38 trillion problem. That is nearly $290,000 for every taxpayer in America. If an average worker earning $50,000 a year paid every single penny in taxes, it would take them over 5 years just to pay off their personal share. And the problem is accelerating. The debt grows by $1 trillion every 100 days. By 2030, it will exceed $45 trillion. By 2035, over $60 trillion. The mathematics are inescapable. This debt can never be repaid through conventional means. But here is the secret nobody is explaining. The government already knows this. The Treasury knows it. The Federal Reserve knows it. And they have already implemented a solution. Not a solution to save the public. A solution to save themselves. The mechanism of devaluation. The mechanism they are using will systematically erode wealth every single day for the next decade, while the government's balance sheet magically improves. To understand this, look at the fundamental shift in affordability. In 1980, the average American worker could buy a house for 3 times their annual salary. Today, it costs 8 times their annual salary. Yet, wages haven't stagnated on paper. Median household income has actually increased by over 250% since 1980. So why is housing unaffordable? Because the currency itself has been systematically devalued. What cost $1 in 1980 costs nearly $4 today according to official numbers. But the real destruction of purchasing power is far worse, because the method for calculating inflation was changed in 1980 specifically to mask the severity of the problem. If inflation were measured today using 1980 methodologies, the real rate would likely be between 8% and 12% annually, not the reported 3% or 4%. This isn't accidental, it is policy. The Federal Reserve has a dual mandate: maximum employment and stable prices. But in reality, there is a third unofficial mandate that supersedes everything else: keep the government solvent. Financial repression. The tool used to achieve this is financial repression, the controlled devaluation of savings to finance government operations. Here is how it works. The government needs to borrow money to function, so it issues bonds. If the government had to pay true market interest rates on $38 trillion of debt, the system would collapse immediately. Interest payments alone would consume nearly half the entire federal budget, leaving nothing for defense, healthcare, or Social Security, so they don't pay market rates. They manipulate the financial system to artificially suppress interest rates. This is done through the Federal Reserve's balance sheet operations. In 2008, the Fed's balance sheet was $800 billion. Today, it is over $7 trillion. Where did that money come from? It was created out of thin air to buy government debt. This creates artificial demand, pushing interest rates down. It allows the government to borrow at 2% or 3% instead of the 6% or 8% the free market would demand. That difference is a subsidy of nearly $2 trillion annually paid for by everyone holding dollars. The trap this creates a fiscal dominance regime, where monetary policy becomes a servant to government debt. The Federal Reserve cannot raise interest rates high enough to truly fight inflation, because doing so would bankrupt the U.S. government through exploding interest payments. They are trapped, and everyone holding currency is trapped with them. Consider the recent inflation spike. When inflation hit 9%, the Fed raised rates. But simultaneously, the government issued trillions in new debt. Who bought that debt? Not the free market. It was bought by captive institutions, pension funds, insurance companies, and banks that are legally required to hold government securities regardless of the return. This leads to a silent wealth transfer. If a savings account pays 2.5% interest, but inflation is 4.5%, the real return is negative. Every year, purchasing power vanishes. Over a decade, a saver might see their account balance grow nominally, but their ability to buy actual goods and services collapses. Multiply this across 330 million people. And trillions of dollars in real wealth are transferred from savers to the government every single year. This is how a $38 trillion debt disappears without ever being paid off. The endgame, the system creates a self-reinforcing cycle. The more debt the government accumulates, the more inflation they need to erode the real value of that debt. The more inflation they create, the more they must suppress interest rates to keep the system from breaking. There are only two ways this ends. Either the dollar collapses, or they successfully inflate away the debt over the next 15 years. The Federal Reserve is betting on the second option. They have done it before. Between 1945 and 1970, the U.S. reduced its debt-to-GDP ratio from 106% to 37% primarily through financial repression, capping rates and allowing inflation to run hot. They eliminated 2/3 of the debt burden without paying back a dollar of principal in real terms. They are doing it again. The Congressional Budget Office projects debt to GDP will peak and then decline. Not because of fiscal responsibility, but because inflation will outpace debt accumulation. By 2038, the government might owe $60 trillion nominally. But if inflation runs at just 3% or 4%, that debt will have the purchasing power of only $39 trillion in today's money. They will have effectively wiped out $21 trillion of debt obligations. The global dimension: who pays for this? Everyone holding dollars. Retirees, pension funds, bondholders, and anyone with a savings account. This wealth transfer explains the everything bubble. Housing prices keep rising and stocks hit new highs, not because the economy is booming, but because the currency is breaking. Investors are fleeing the dollar into hard assets, real estate, gold, equities, anything that isn't a claim on future dollars. The international dimension makes this even more volatile. Foreign central banks hold over $7 trillion in U.S. treasuries. As the dollar loses purchasing power, these nations are effectively subsidizing U.S. debt. They're trapped in a prisoner's dilemma. If they sell their holdings, they crash the global system and hurt themselves. So they hold and watch their wealth slowly evaporate. The digital future, in conclusion, the endgame is already visible. Central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, are being developed globally. These aren't just upgrades. They are control mechanisms. They allow for negative interest rates, automated taxation, and complete visibility into every transaction. It is the ultimate evolution of financial repression. The strategy for individuals is clear. Holding cash guarantees a loss of purchasing power. The system is designed to push capital into risk assets to outpace inflation. This is the most sophisticated theft in human history. It is executed in plain sight, documented in central bank papers, and completely invisible to the people bearing the cost. The $38 trillion debt won't be paid by the government. It will be paid by the purchasing power of the currency. The transfer is happening right now, in real time. The only question is whether one recognizes the mechanism in time to protect their wealth, or becomes the collateral damage of a decades-long liquidation. The mechanism is active. The math is inexorable. Choose wisely, like and subscribe for more.